This is David Sandbeck with Minnesota Spectator News. There's a report out of the Minnesota Reformer by Derek Meander, an analysis of the pandemic and its response and its relation to our economy. So there's an economic Armageddon underway. So let's get into it. More than 50,000 Minnesotans in the food service industry have applied for unemployment benefits. We know small businesses are getting hit hardest by the economic fallout from COVID-19. How bad is it? We're still a little in the dark because so many of these small companies have simply vanished. They're not responding to surveys as they usually would from governments, chambers of commerce, and trade associations. But from the limited data we have and some good old-fashioned inference, we know it's bad, real bad. A new study published, the National Bureau of Economic Research attempts to describe the impact. The study surveyed 5,800 small businesses around the country, asking business owners about closures, staffing, and financial solvency. According to the survey, 43% of small businesses are temporarily closed. A typical company survey reduced employment by 40% since January. The median company in this survey also had less than 1 month cash on hand. During times of economic crisis, cash flow, or the amount of liquid assets a company is bringing in on a monthly basis, can make or break a firm, which means both companies that are currently closed, but even those with reduced hours and thus reduced revenue, are at risk of permanent closure. The study asked companies what the likelihood would be that their company would remain open by December 2020, depending on the long-term work from home remain in place. Those industries least likely to make it to December before shuttering and are restaurants, bars, catering, personal services, tourism, lodging. Small businesses are responsible for roughly half of the United States employment. So tracking the growth or decline of small businesses allows us to weigh the potential impact on the economy. In the 5 weeks following March 13th, that emergency order, there was a 27% drop in new business applications nationwide, the largest decline on record. And a survey done by ADP shows that initial unemployment claims were highly concentrated among small businesses. Here in Minnesota, although we're home to 17 Fortune 500 companies that employ tens of thousands here and around the globe, we also rely on a vibrant small business sector for our jobs and economic growth. In 2017, Minnesota was home to about 116,000 businesses with fewer than 500 employees, according to the United States Census Bureau. All told, they employed about 1.26 million Minnesotans. That's 41% of our total workforce. Here's an example. As of the end of 2019, Minnesota had over 2,800,000 workers in the leisure and hospitality sector, nearly 10% of the state workforce. As summer approaches, Minnesota's tourism industry, which is home to mainly of these small businesses, is likely to feel the crushing absence of the familiar flow of tourists. What is the likelihood that the economy will open up in a month, 4 months, 6 months? According to the survey mentioned above, the majority of businesses don't believe they'll return to business as usual until July 1st. How is Minnesota weathering the storm? The CARES Act included $349 billion in forgivable loans for small business to help them survive. And when the money ran out, Congress pumped another $310 billion. Minnesota companies received $9 billion during the first round. According to the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, or DEED, over 640,000 Minnesotans have filed for unemployment since March 16th. But there's another issue at play. In addition to the people laid off and furloughed, people are dropping out of the labor pool altogether, meaning they're giving up looking for work. Minnesotans' our labor force dropped by a dramatic 1.5% in April, according to DEED. The labor force percentage, which now rests at 69.1% includes those that are currently unemployed but are looking for work. Nearly 48,000 workers decided not to pursue employment or look for a job in March. This is a likely outcome for those nearing retirement or for students who would rather go to school than compete in a failing market. If the strong labor force participation rate suggests workers are confident in economic future, then a reduced participation rate suggests the opposite. As of March, there were 3,073,000 Minnesotans participating in the labor force. If we take the number of unemployment claims since March as a percentage of total workers, we get 20%. This means that since March 16th, roughly 20% of all Minnesotan workers have been laid off. What this means for the economy and the true scope of the coming recession remains to be seen. We know a lot of people are out of work and that consumers are not spending money except on essentials. But data concerning business closures is difficult to find because of the pandemic. For Minnesota, one way to predict future business closures is by looking at the number of unemployed by sector and then comparing that sector to the overall Minnesota economy. For example, over 50,000 Minnesota workers in food and beverage have been laid off, but most of any sector. Restaurants are the most numerous businesses in Minnesota, with over 8,700 unique businesses. This comes as no surprise, but the layoffs in the restaurant sector indicate that permanent closures are likely imminent. The more vulnerable sectors of the economy, like part-time restaurant workers with little to no benefits, are being laid off like never before, putting financial stress on households that were already living paycheck to paycheck before the crisis. In other words, the have-nots will have even less. So taking a look at this, in summary, we have had a vibrant restaurant community. They're struggling now. The CARE Act bailed out the plutocracy. It served, protected, and defended the plutocracy, but it didn't help the common people. We had a one-time insult of $1,200, and we had just a massive transfer of wealth following that. And we didn't have the kind of legislation that sought to make sure that small businesses were protected. And the way we did the CARES Act, there's a rush to spend this money, no rush to accountability. And those that had an existing relationship with the big banks were given priority to this allocated money from the CARES Act. So what we need to do is you contact your legislators, you make sure they know that the response, this Pelosi scheme, this heist, didn't cut it, that our restaurateurs, our small business owners, our common people are going to be in the middle of a financial Armageddon, and they need to find a way to, number one, for the people, an emergency universal basic income, and for small businesses, grants are what they need. And then overall, we really need to consider a moratorium on rents, especially for small businesses, and figure out how we keep everything in stasis until we can recover from COVID-19. I'm David Sandbeck with Minnesota Spectator News. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.